The windshield wipers could barely keep up with the falling snow. Tom gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as he drove down the empty country road. It was Christmas Eve, almost midnight, and all he wanted was to get home to his son. His shift at the warehouse had run late again, but that was life when you were doing it all on your own. The heater in his old truck was working overtime, fighting against the cold December air seeping through the worn door seals. Tom glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 11:47. His boy Kevin would be sound asleep by now, probably dreaming about the presents waiting under their small tree. Tom had scraped together enough money for that new video game Kevin had been asking for all year. It wasn't much, but it would make the kid smile, and that was all that mattered. The road ahead was dark except for his headlights cutting through the snow. This route took him past old farmland that had been abandoned for years. Most people avoided it, especially at night, but it shaved 15 minutes off his drive home. Tonight, those 15 minutes meant everything. He was exhausted. His back ached from lifting boxes all evening, and his eyes were starting to feel heavy. That's when he saw them. At first, Tom thought his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. Two small shapes on the side of the road, barely visible through the swirling snow. He blinked hard, leaning forward to get a better look. His foot moved instinctively to the brake pedal. They were children. Two little girls standing by the roadside in the middle of nowhere. Tom's heart jumped into his throat. He slowed the truck to a crawl, his mind racing. What were kids doing out here? Where were their parents? The temperature had to be below freezing, and the snow was coming down harder now. As his headlights swept over them, he could see them more clearly. They looked identical. Twins, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with blonde hair pulled back into pigtails. They wore matching pink winter coats, but even from inside his truck, Tom could tell the coats weren't nearly warm enough for this kind of weather. The girls were huddled close together, and one of them had her arm wrapped protectively around the other. Tom pulled over immediately, his truck sliding slightly on the icy shoulder. He threw it into park and jumped out, not even bothering to grab his own coat. The cold hit him like a wall, but he barely noticed. His father instincts had kicked in completely. "Hey, are you girls okay?" he called out as he jogged toward them, his boots crunching in the snow. The twins looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. They didn't say anything, just pressed closer together. Tom stopped a few feet away, not wanting to scare them more than they already were. He could see now that their faces were red from the cold. Their lips had a slight blue tint, and they were shivering badly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," Tom said, keeping his voice soft and calm. "My name is Tom. I have a little boy at home about your age. Can you tell me where your mom and dad are?" The girls just stared at him. One of them had tears frozen on her cheeks. Tom looked around desperately, hoping to see a car with its hazards on. Maybe parents changing a tire or dealing with a breakdown. But there was nothing. Just empty road, bare trees, and falling snow. No houses nearby, no other vehicles, nothing. How did these kids end up out here? He crouched down to their level, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "Are you lost? Did you wander away from somewhere?" Still no response. The girls just kept holding on to each other, trembling in the cold. Tom's mind was working fast. These kids were in danger. Real danger. Hypothermia was no joke, especially for little ones. He couldn't just leave them here while he went for help. But he also knew you weren't supposed to just pick up random kids without their parents' permission. Under normal circumstances, that would be true. But these weren't normal circumstances. These children needed help right now. "Listen, you're freezing," Tom said gently. "My truck is warm. How about you sit inside where it's warm, and we'll figure out how to find your parents. Does that sound okay?" One of the girls, the one who seemed slightly braver, gave a tiny nod. "Okay, good," Tom said, relief washing over him. He stood up and took off his work jacket, wrapping it around both girls even though it was way too big for them. The jacket practically swallowed them whole. He guided them toward his truck, moving slowly so they could keep up. When he opened the passenger door, the warm air rushed out. The girls climbed in without hesitation this time, clearly desperate to escape the cold. Tom helped them onto the bench seat and cranked the heat up as high as it would go. As he walked around to the driver's side, his heart was pounding. Where did these kids come from? He looked down the road in both directions again. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe they lived in one of the farms nearby and wandered off, but he hadn't seen any houses with lights on for miles. He got back in the truck and pulled the door shut. The girls were sitting pressed together in the middle of the seat, still not saying a word. Up close, Tom could see they were wearing thin sneakers that were completely soaked through. Their little feet must have been freezing. "Can you tell me your names?" Tom asked, putting the truck in gear and starting to drive slowly. He figured he'd head toward town and the police station. That seemed like the right thing to do. The girls exchanged glances. The braver one whispered something to her sister and then looked at Tom. "I'm Sophie," she said quietly. "This is Grace." "Sophie and Grace," Tom repeated, trying to sound encouraging. "Those are really pretty names. It's nice to meet you, even though I wish it wasn't under these circumstances. Do you know where you live? Can you tell me your address?" Grace, the quieter one, finally spoke up. Her voice was so soft Tom could barely hear it. "The Brown House. The Brown House," Tom said. "Okay, that's good. Is it near here?" Sophie shook her head. "We got lost. We were following the lights." "The lights?" Tom asked. "The Christmas lights," Grace added. "From the neighbor's house. They were so pretty, and we wanted to see them better. But then we couldn't find our way back." Tom's stomach dropped. These little girls had wandered away from home, following Christmas decorations, and ended up lost in the middle of nowhere on the coldest night of the year. If he hadn't come along when he didn't want to think about what might have happened. "Does your mom know you're out here?" Tom asked carefully. Both girls shook their heads. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Mommy's going to be so worried." "It's okay," Tom said quickly. "We're going to get you back to your mom real soon. I promise." He drove faster now, but not too fast given the road conditions. The police station was still about 20 minutes away. He glanced at his phone sitting in the cup holder. No signal out here. He wasn't surprised. This area was notorious for dead zones. "Are you girls hungry?" Tom asked, trying to keep them talking. "I think I have some crackers in here somewhere." "We had dinner," Sophie said. "Mommy made spaghetti. It's Grace's favorite." "I like spaghetti too," Tom said, watching them in the rearview mirror. "Hey, do you know your phone number?" "Your mom's phone number?" Grace recited a number and Tom tried to memorize it. He'd call as soon as he got a signal. The truck's heater was doing its job now. The girls had stopped shivering as badly, though they still looked scared and cold. Tom reached behind the seat and pulled out an old blanket he kept for emergencies. "Here, wrap this around you." The twins pulled the blanket over themselves, huddling underneath it together. Tom's heart ached looking at them. They were so small, so vulnerable. What kind of mother let her kids wander off like this? But then he stopped himself. He didn't know the situation. Maybe she was a single parent like him, exhausted and overwhelmed. Maybe she'd fallen asleep after a long day. He knew better than anyone how hard it was doing it alone. "My son Kevin is 8, Tom said, trying to distract them. "He's probably asleep right now, dreaming about Christmas morning." "Do you girls believe in Santa Claus?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically, some of the fear leaving their faces for a moment. "We left cookies out for him," Grace said, "and carrots for the reindeer." "That's really nice of you," Tom smiled. "I bet Santa will appreciate that." As they drove through the snowy night, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something about this whole situation felt off. Not just that the girls were lost, but something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. The way they'd been standing on that deserted road, the fact that there were no houses anywhere nearby, the way they seemed almost afraid to talk about their home. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Right now, his job was to get these kids somewhere safe and warm and help them find their mother. Everything else could wait. The police station came into view about 15 minutes later. Tom had never been so relieved to see the old brick building with its blue and white sign. A few cars sat in the parking lot and the windows glowed with warm light. He pulled into a spot near the entrance and turned to look at Sophie and Grace. "Okay, girls, we're here," he said gently. "The police officers inside are really nice people. They're going to help us find your mom. There's nothing to be scared of." Grace's eyes went wide with worry. "Are we in trouble?" Tom's heart melted a little. "No, sweetie, you're not in trouble at all. You just got lost, that's all. These folks help lost kids all the time. It's kind of their job." He got out and came around to help the girls down from the truck. They were still wrapped in his blanket, looking like two little ghosts. The cold air hit them again as they crossed the parking lot, but this time they'd only be in it for a few seconds. The door chimed as they walked in. The front desk area was quiet, decorated with a small Christmas tree in the corner and some paper snowflakes taped to the windows. A woman in uniform looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read Officer Davis, and she had kind eyes that reminded Tom of his own mother. "Can I help you?" she asked, but her expression changed immediately when she saw the twins. She stood up quickly. "Oh my goodness, are these children all right?" "I found them on the road," Tom explained, stepping forward. "Out on Miller Road, about 20 miles from here. They were just standing there in the snow. I think they wandered away from home." Officer Davis came around the desk, her face full of concern. She knelt down in front of Sophie and Grace. "Hi there, sweethearts. I'm Officer Davis. You must be freezing. Let me get you some hot chocolate, okay?" The girls nodded, and some of the tension seemed to leave their little shoulders. There was something about Officer Davis that just felt safe and motherly. "Have a seat right here," Officer Davis said, pointing to a bench along the wall. She disappeared into a back room and returned a moment later with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate and a box of cookies. "Here you go. Careful, it's hot." While the girls sipped their drinks, Officer Davis pulled Tom aside. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Tom explained everything. How he'd been driving home from work, how he'd spotted them on the roadside, how they said they'd been following Christmas lights and got lost. "They told me their names are Sophie and Grace. Grace gave me a phone number, but I didn't have signal out there to call it." Officer Davis wrote everything down. "Did they say anything else? Last name, address?" "Just that they live in a brown house," Tom said. "I got the feeling they were scared to say too much. But I don't know if that's just because they were cold and frightened, or if there's something else going on." "You did the right thing bringing them here," Officer Davis said. She walked over to her computer and started typing. "Let me check missing persons reports. 2 little blonde girls should definitely be in the system if someone's reported them missing." Tom stood there, his arms crossed, watching the twins. They were warming up now, the color returning to their cheeks. Grace had chocolate on her upper lip, and Sophie was carefully holding her cup with both hands. They looked so normal, so innocent. Just 2 kids who'd made a mistake and wandered too far from home. But then Officer Davis made a sound that made Tom's blood run cold. It was a sharp intake of breath, the kind you make when you see something shocking. "What is it?" Tom asked, moving closer to the desk. Officer Davis was staring at her screen, her face pale. Her hand moved to her mouth. "This can't be right," she whispered. "What can't be right?" Tom's heart started pounding. Officer Davis looked at him, then at the girls, then back at her screen. She clicked her mouse a few times as if she was hoping the information would change. "Mr. Thompson?" "Tom Thompson." "Mr. Thompson, can you come look at this? But quietly, please. I don't want to alarm the children." Tom moved behind the desk. Officer Davis had pulled up a missing persons report. The photo showed 2 little blonde girls, identical twins, with pigtails. They looked exactly like Sophie and Grace. The names matched too. "That's them," Tom said. "So their parents did report them missing." "Look at the date," Officer Davis said, her voice shaky. Tom's eyes moved to the top of the report. "Filed 3 years ago. December 20th, 3 years ago." 3 years? Tom said, confused. "That doesn't make sense. They can't have been missing for 3 years. They're right there." He pointed at the bench where the girls sat, happily eating cookies. "There's more," Officer Davis said. She scrolled down and Tom read the updates on the case. His stomach dropped with each line. "January 15th, 2 years ago. Bodies recovered from vehicle accident. Silver Honda Civic found in ravine off Highway 42. 3 fatalities. Rebecca Hartwell, age 28, and twin daughters Sophie and Grace Hartwell, age 4. Case closed." Tom felt dizzy. He had to grab the edge of the desk. "That says they died. It says they died in a car crash 2 years ago." "I know what it says," Officer Davis replied, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her phone. "But unless I'm looking at ghosts, those girls are very much alive." Tom looked back at Sophie and Grace. They were giggling about something, Grace wiping chocolate from her sister's chin. They were solid, real, warm. They'd been freezing cold in the snow. They'd climbed into his truck. They'd drunk hot chocolate. They were not ghosts. "There has to be a mistake in the system," Tom said. "Wrong names, wrong kids, wrong something." "The photos match," Officer Davis said. "The names match. The ages match. The mother's name matches. Everything matches except for the fact that these children are supposed to be dead." She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "This is Officer Davis at the station. I need Detective Morrison here immediately. I don't care that it's Christmas Eve. This is an emergency." She paused. Trust me, she'll want to come in for this. After she hung up, Officer Davis sat down heavily in her chair. Detective Morrison was the lead on this case. She's the one who identified the bodies. She's the one who closed the file. Tom felt like he was in a dream. A very strange, unsettling dream. Could the identification have been wrong? Could they have made a mistake? Dental records, Officer Davis said quietly. They used dental records to confirm the identities. It was a bad accident. The car caught fire, but the dental records matched. For the next 20 minutes, they waited in uncomfortable silence. Tom sat on the bench with the girls, who were starting to look sleepy now that they were warm and fed. Grace leaned against his shoulder, and he found himself putting his arm around her protectively. Whatever was going on here, these kids were innocent in all of it. The door burst open, and a woman in jeans and a heavy coat rushed in. She had to be in her 40s, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. This was clearly Detective Morrison. "Where are they?" she demanded, then stopped dead when she saw the twins on the bench. The color drained from her face. Tom watched as she gripped the doorframe, steadying herself. "That's impossible," she breathed. Officer Davis stood up. "I know, but they're here. They're real." Detective Morrison walked slowly toward the bench as if she was approaching a mirage that might disappear. She knelt down in front of Sophie and Grace, studying their faces intently. "What are your names?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Sophie." "That's Grace," Sophie said, looking confused by all the attention. "And what's your mommy's name?" "Rebecca," Grace said. "Rebecca Hartwell, why? Is our mommy here?" Detective Morrison stood up abruptly and walked to the other side of the room. Tom could see her hands shaking. Officer Davis followed her, and they spoke in hushed tones near the Christmas tree. Tom tried not to listen, but he couldn't help catching bits and pieces. "I saw the bodies myself," Detective Morrison was saying. "I was at the scene. The car was completely destroyed. The coroner confirmed 3 bodies. The dental records matched." "How could I have gotten this wrong?" "Maybe they weren't the only children," Officer Davis suggested. "Maybe Rebecca had other twins that nobody knew about." "That's impossible. We investigated her whole life. There were no other children." Tom's mind was racing. If those really were Sophie and Grace on the missing persons report, and if the bodies in that car crash weren't them, then whose bodies were they? And more importantly, where had these girls been for the past 2 years? Why did everyone think they were dead? Detective Morrison took a deep breath and walked back over. She pulled up a chair and sat facing the twins. "Sophie, Grace, I need you to answer some questions for me, okay? You're not in trouble. I just need to understand some things." "Okay," Sophie said. "Where do you live? Do you remember your address?" The girls looked at each other. "We live with Mommy and Aunt Rachel," Grace said. "Aunt Rachel," Detective Morrison repeated, making a note. "And where is that?" "In the brown house," Sophie said. "With the red door. What town?" The girls looked confused. "I don't know," Sophie admitted. "Do you go to school?" Both girls shook their heads. "Mommy teaches us at home," Grace said. "She says regular school isn't safe for us yet." Detective Morrison's jaw tightened. Tom could see she was trying to stay calm, but something about what the girls were saying was clearly bothering her. Detective Morrison was on her phone within seconds, pacing back and forth across the small police station. Tom watched her making call after call, her voice urgent but professional. Officer Davis had brought more blankets for the girls, who were now curled up together on the bench, their eyes drooping with exhaustion. "I need you to pull every piece of evidence from the Hartwell case," Detective Morrison said into her phone. "Yes, I know it's closed. Yes, I know it's Christmas Eve, just do it. And I need the original dental records that were used for identification. Get them from the coroner's office." She paused, listening. "I don't care if you have to wake someone up. This is urgent." Tom sat down next to the sleeping girls, making sure they were covered with the blankets. His own son was at home, probably still asleep, having no idea his dad was caught up in something this bizarre. He checked his phone. 1:15 in the morning. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Thompson," Detective Morrison said, ending her call and walking over. "I need you to tell me again, in as much detail as possible, exactly where you found these girls." Tom went through it all again. The exact location on Miller Road, how they were just standing there, what they were wearing, everything they'd said in the truck. Detective Morrison took notes, her expression growing darker with each detail. "That area," she said slowly. "That's about 40 miles from where the accident supposedly happened." But there are some rural properties out that way. Farms, old homesteads, places where someone could hide if they wanted to. Officer Davis had been working at her computer. "I've been looking into Rachel Hartwell," she called out. Rebecca's sister. She quit her job at the hospital 2 years ago, right around the time of the accident. Just walked away without giving notice. No forwarding address. No job since then, at least not under her real name. "So she helped fake it," Detective Morrison said, more to herself than anyone else. Rachel had access to medical records, dental records. If she was helping her sister escape from an abusive situation, she might have been willing to cross some serious lines. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm not a cop, but if this Rebecca person really did all this to protect her kids from a dangerous father, does she have to go to jail? I mean, isn't there some kind of understanding for cases like this?" Detective Morrison's expression softened a little. "That's complicated, Mr. Thompson. What she did, if she did it, is fraud. It's falsifying death certificates, insurance fraud, obstruction of justice. Those are serious crimes, but—" She glanced at the sleeping twins. "I've seen what abuse does to families. I've seen women trapped in impossible situations. If David Hartwell is as bad as I remember, and if the system failed to protect Rebecca and her daughters, then I understand why she might have felt she had no other choice." "So you're sympathetic," Tom said. "I'm realistic," Detective Morrison corrected. "But first we need to find her. She's probably terrified right now. Her children are missing, and it's the middle of the night. We need to locate her before she does something drastic." Sophie stirred and opened her eyes. She looked around, momentarily confused, then remembered where she was. "Is my mommy coming?" she asked sleepily. "We're looking for her right now, sweetie," Officer Davis said kindly. "Do you remember anything else about where you live? Anything that might help us?" Grace woke up too, rubbing her eyes. "There's a big tree," she said, "in the front yard. And Mrs. Patterson's farm is next door. She has chickens. We can hear them in the morning." Detective Morrison's eyes lit up. "Mrs. Patterson, that's something. Officer Davis, check property records for anyone named Patterson in the rural areas within a 50-mile radius of Miller Road." Officer Davis's fingers flew across the keyboard. Minutes ticked by. Tom found himself holding his breath, though he wasn't sure why. These weren't his kids. This wasn't his problem. But somehow, sitting here in this police station on Christmas Eve, he felt invested. He wanted to know that Sophie and Grace would be okay. He wanted to know their mother would be okay too. "Got something?" Officer Davis said suddenly. "Patterson. Helen Patterson. She owns a farm property about 30 miles from where Mr. Thompson found the girls. The property next to hers is registered to an R. Hart. No first name listed." "R. Hart," Detective Morrison repeated. "Rebecca Hartwell has to be. She changed just enough to slip under the radar, but not so much that she'd lose track of her own identity. Smart." She grabbed her coat. "I'm going out there. Want backup?" Officer Davis asked. "No. Call the sheriff's department and have them send a deputy to meet me there, but tell them to stay back unless I call for them. This is a delicate situation. I don't want to spook her. If Rebecca thinks we're coming to arrest her, she might run again, and this time we might not find the girls." She looked at Tom. "Mr. Thompson, I'd like you to come with me." Tom blinked. "Me? Why?" "Because these girls trust you. You saved them. If their mother is as frightened as I think she is, seeing you with her daughters might help calm the situation. Besides, you're not law enforcement. Your presence might make this feel less like an arrest and more like a rescue." Tom looked at Sophie and Grace. "What about them? They should probably stay here where it's warm." "No," Sophie said firmly, suddenly wide awake. "We want to go to Mommy, please. We want to see our Mommy." Grace nodded vigorously, tears forming in her eyes. "We promise we'll be good. We just want our Mommy." Detective Morrison crouched down in front of them. "Okay, you can come. But you have to stay in the car when we first get there, all right? Let me talk to your Mommy first. Can you do that?" Both girls agreed immediately. The drive through the snowy night was tense. Tom followed Detective Morrison's car in his truck. The twins buckled in beside him. They were more alert now, excited and nervous about seeing their mother. The roads were slippery and the snow hadn't let up. Tom's headlights cut through the darkness as they wound through empty country roads. "Are we in trouble?" Sophie asked for the third time. "No, honey, you're not in trouble," Tom assured her again. "Your mom might be worried, but she won't be mad. She'll just be happy you're safe." "What about the lady detective?" Grace asked. Is Mommy in trouble? Tom didn't know how to answer that. The detective just wants to talk to your mom. That's all. After 30 minutes, Detective Morrison's brake lights flashed and both vehicles slowed. Tom could see a mailbox up ahead with a small, barely visible number. The detective turned onto a long driveway. Tom followed, his truck bouncing over the rutted, snow-covered path. A house emerged from the darkness. It was small, brown, just like the girls had said, with a red front door. The windows were blazing with light. Every single one. Someone was awake, and Tom could guess why. A mother's worst nightmare was unfolding in that house right now. As they pulled up, the front door flew open. A woman ran out into the snow wearing just pajamas and slippers. She was thin, with long brown hair flying wild around her face. Even from inside the truck, Tom could see the absolute terror in her expression. "Stay here," Tom told the girls firmly. "Just for a minute." "Let the detective talk first, and that's Mommy," Sophie cried, pressing her face against the window. Rebecca Hartwell saw Detective Morrison getting out of her car and stopped dead. The color drained from her face. She looked like she might collapse right there in the snow. Another woman appeared in the doorway, this one with shorter hair and wearing a thick robe. That must be Rachel, the sister. Detective Morrison held up her hands in a calming gesture. "Ms. Hartwell, I'm Detective Morrison. I need you to stay calm. Where are my babies?" Rebecca's voice was raw, desperate. "What have you done with my babies?" "I've been looking everywhere. I've been calling everyone. Please tell me they're okay." "They're safe," Detective Morrison said quickly. "They're right here. They're in that truck." Rebecca's head whipped toward Tom's vehicle. She started running toward it, slipping in the snow but catching herself. Tom barely had time to unlock the doors before she was yanking the passenger door open. "Sophie." "Grace," Rebecca sobbed, pulling both girls into her arms. She fell to her knees in the snow, clutching her daughters, crying so hard her whole body shook. Oh my God, I thought I'd lost you. I thought he'd found you. I thought..." The girls were crying too, both of them talking at once, trying to explain about the Christmas lights and getting lost and the nice man who'd helped them. Rebecca looked up at Tom through her tears. "You found them? You saved them?" Tom nodded, feeling awkward. "I was just driving home from work. They were on Miller Road." Miller Road. Rachel had come down from the house now, pulling a coat around her sister's shoulders. "That's miles from here. How did you girls get all the way out there?" Through the tears and explanations, a story emerged. The girls had snuck out while Rebecca was asleep. She'd been up for 2 days straight with the flu, finally dozed off around 8 o'clock. When she woke up at 10:30, their beds were empty. She and Rachel had been searching ever since, driving every road they could think of, calling the few neighbors they trusted, panicking more with each passing minute. Detective Morrison stood back watching the reunion. Her expression... Rebecca stood there in the snow, shivering despite the coat Rachel had draped over her shoulders. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else there too. Exhaustion. The kind that comes from years of looking over your shoulder, years of living in fear. "Can we at least go inside?" she asked quietly. "It's freezing out here and I need to be near my daughters." Detective Morrison nodded. Of course, they walked into the small house. It was modestly furnished but clean and warm. Christmas decorations were scattered around, clearly put up by the girls. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, and a small tree stood in the corner decorated with handmade ornaments. Sophie and Grace were sitting at the kitchen table with mugs of hot chocolate, Rachel hovering nearby protectively. Rebecca went straight to her daughters, kissing each of their heads, touching their faces as if to confirm they were real. Then she took a deep breath and turned to face Detective Morrison. "I know who you are," Rebecca said. "You investigated David 3 years ago when I tried to press charges. You were kind to me, but you said there wasn't enough evidence. You said his lawyers would tear me apart on the stand." Detective Morrison's jaw tightened. "I remember. And I was right. They would have. The system failed you, Ms. Hartwell. I'm not here to pretend it didn't. So why are you here?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because 2 little girls who are supposed to be dead just walked into my police station tonight. And I need to know the truth." Rebecca looked at her daughters, then at Rachel. Her sister gave her a small, encouraging nod. Finally, Rebecca sat down at the table and the story began to pour out. "David was charming at first," she started, her voice hollow. "Everyone loved him. He was successful, confident, generous. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already pregnant. With twins, no less. She laughed bitterly. I thought maybe having children would change him. Instead, it got worse. Tom stood by the doorway listening. Sophie and Grace had stopped drinking their hot chocolate, watching their mother with worried eyes. The first time he hit me, Sophie and Grace were 6 months old. I'd left the girls with my mother and gone to the grocery store. When I came back, he was furious because I'd been gone too long. He said I was a terrible mother, that I was probably out with other men. That's when I knew I had to leave. But you didn't, Detective Morrison said. It wasn't a judgment, just a fact. I tried, Rebecca said, tears starting to fall again. God knows I tried. I went to my mother's house, but David showed up the next day with flowers and apologies. He convinced my mother that I was overreacting, that I was dealing with postpartum depression. She actually told me to go back to him to work on our marriage. Rebecca's voice cracked. He isolated me from everyone. Every time I tried to leave, he'd find me. He had money, connections, people who owed him favors. Rachel put her hand on her sister's shoulder. I told her to call the police, to document everything. And she did. For 2 years, she documented everything. Rebecca nodded. Bruises. Hospital visits. I kept records of everything. When the girls were 3, I finally got brave enough to file for divorce and request full custody. That's when you got involved, Detective. The domestic abuse investigation, Detective Morrison said, remembering. We couldn't make the charges stick. His lawyers claimed the bruises were from accidents, that you were unstable, that you were trying to extort money from him. And the judge believed them, Rebecca said bitterly, or at least he couldn't prove otherwise. The divorce was granted, but David got partial custody. Can you imagine? A man who'd terrorized me for years was going to have my daughters every other weekend. Her hands were shaking. He told me right outside the courtroom that he'd make my life hell. He said he'd take the girls from me completely, that he had judges and lawyers in his pocket and I'd never see them again. Tom felt sick. He glanced at Sophie and Grace, who were holding hands under the table. I was terrified, Rebecca continued. The first weekend he was supposed to have the girls, I almost didn't let them go. But Rachel convinced me that if I violated the custody agreement, I'd lose them for sure, so I let them go. She started crying harder. When he brought them back, Grace had a bruise on her arm. She said she'd fallen, but I knew. I knew what that bruise really meant. That's when I realized I had to do something drastic. Rachel stepped forward. That's when she came to me. I'd been researching options for months, desperate to help her. And I'd found out about some cases where women had successfully disappeared with their children. It's not easy and it's not legal, but sometimes it's the only way to truly protect them. Detective Morrison was taking notes, her expression neutral. So you decided to fake your deaths? Not at first, Rachel said. At first, we just wanted to run. New identities, new state, start over. But David had private investigators. He would have found her eventually. We needed something permanent, something that would make him stop looking. Rebecca wiped her eyes. The car accident was Rachel's idea. There was a woman who'd died in the hospital where Rachel worked. No family, no one to claim her body, and there were 2 young girls in foster care who died in a house fire around the same time. Their bodies were badly burned. She paused, struggling with the words. Rachel worked with someone in the coroner's office who was sympathetic to domestic abuse situations. Together, they switched the records, made it look like the woman and the 2 girls were us. Tom felt his stomach turn. This was darker than he'd imagined. We staged the accident on Highway 42, Rachel continued. I was the one driving. I found an old car similar to Rebecca's and I drove it off the ravine. I set it on fire. Then I walked away. The next day, when authorities found it, the dental records matched the bodies we'd substituted. Rebecca Hartwell and her twin daughters were officially dead. Detective Morrison was silent for a long moment. Do you have any idea how many laws you broke? How many people you implicated in fraud? The coroner who helped you could lose their license, face prison time. I know, Rachel said quietly, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because look at them. She pointed at Sophie and Grace. Those girls are alive and safe. For 2 years, they've lived without fear. They've laughed and played and been normal children. Isn't that worth something? And David? Detective Morrison asked. What happened to him? He grieved, I think, Rebecca said. Or at least he put on a good show of it. There was a funeral, a memorial service. His friends and family all said how tragic it was. And then after about 6 months, he moved on, started dating someone new. I kept track through social media, just to make sure he wasn't looking for us. He believed we were dead. He stopped looking. Detective Morrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snowy night. The room was silent except for the ticking of a clock on the wall and the occasional sniffle from Rebecca. Finally, the detective turned around. "You put me in an impossible position, Ms. Hartwell. What you did is illegal no matter the circumstances. I should arrest you right now. You, your sister, possibly even the coroner who helped you." "I know," Rebecca whispered, pulling her daughters close. Sophie and Grace started crying, clinging to their mother. "But," Detective Morrison continued, "I also know what the system did to you. I know that we failed to protect you and your children from a dangerous man. I know that you felt you had no other choice." She paused. "I need time to figure out how to handle this. In the meantime, I need to know about David Hartwell. Is he still a threat?" Rebecca nodded. "Always. Men like him don't change. If he knew we were alive, he'd come for us. He'd take the girls just to hurt me." Detective Morrison made a decision. Tom could see it in her face, the way her expression shifted from conflicted to determined. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going back to the station to do some digging into David Hartwell. If he's been up to anything illegal in the past 2 years, and I suspect he has, then maybe we can deal with him first before we deal with your situation." "You're not arresting her?" Tom asked, surprised. "Not tonight," Detective Morrison said. "It's Christmas Eve. Those girls have been through enough trauma for one night. Ms. Hartwell, you and your daughters are to stay here. Don't run. If you run, I will find you and things will be much worse. Do you understand?" Rebecca nodded, not quite believing what she was hearing. "Yes, thank you." Detective Morrison walked to the door, then turned back. "Mr. Thompson, can I speak with you outside?" Tom followed her out into the cold. The snow had finally stopped, and the first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the eastern sky. Christmas morning was coming. "That woman in there," Detective Morrison said. "She's a good mother who was pushed to the edge. But she still broke the law. Multiple laws. I can't just ignore that." "But you're going to try," Tom said. "I'm going to try to find a solution that doesn't destroy this family any more than it's already been destroyed," she corrected. "But I need your help." Tom made it home just as the sun was fully rising on Christmas morning. His truck pulled into the driveway of his small house, and he sat there for a moment, exhausted but too wired to feel it. The past few hours felt like a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. He wasn't sure which. The front door flew open and Kevin came running out in his pajamas, not even wearing shoes. "Dad, where were you?" "It's Christmas. I woke up and you weren't here." Tom climbed out of the truck and caught his son in a hug. "I'm sorry, buddy. I had to help some people. I'll tell you about it later. Right now, let's go see what presents you got, okay?" They spent the morning doing normal Christmas things. Opening presents, making pancakes, watching Kevin's favorite holiday movies. But Tom's mind kept drifting back to that brown house, to Rebecca and her daughters, to the impossible situation Detective Morrison was trying to navigate. Around noon, his phone rang. It was Detective Morrison. "Mr. Thompson, I have some information I thought you'd want to know," she said. "I've been digging into David Hartwell's activities over the past 2 years. It turns out our friend has been very busy." Tom stepped into the kitchen, away from where Kevin was playing with his new video game. "What did you find?" "Financial fraud, for starters. He's been running an investment scheme that's currently under federal investigation. There's also evidence of witness intimidation in a separate case. And here's the interesting part. One of his former girlfriends filed a restraining order against him 6 months ago. Claims of domestic abuse. The pattern continues." "So he's still the same person he always was," Tom said. "Worse, actually. He's escalated. The feds are building a case against him, but it takes time. However, I made some calls this morning, pulled a few strings. I have some friends in the federal prosecutor's office. They're very interested in what I have to tell them about David Hartwell." She paused. "I think we might be able to put him away for a long time, Tom. Long enough that he'd never be a threat to Rebecca and her daughters again." Tom felt a weight lift off his chest. "That's good news. It's a start," Detective Morrison corrected. "But it doesn't solve Rebecca's problem. She still faked her death. She's still living under a false identity. Her sister still helped her commit fraud. Those are crimes that don't just disappear. So what happens now? Now we wait. I'm going to work with the prosecutor's office to build the case against David. Once he's behind bars, once the threat is neutralized, Then we can figure out what to do about Rebecca. Maybe there's a path forward that doesn't destroy her family. Maybe the judge will be sympathetic given the circumstances. I honestly don't know. After they hung up, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. These weren't strangers anymore. Sophie and Grace weren't just two lost kids he'd found on the road. They were real people living in constant fear, and he'd become part of their story. Over the next 3 months, Tom stayed in contact with Detective Morrison. He wrote detailed statements about finding the girls, about Rebecca's obvious love for her daughters, about the fear in their eyes when they talked about their father. He offered to testify if needed. He also did something unexpected. He started visiting Rebecca and her daughters. At first it was just to check in, make sure they were okay. But Kevin came with him once and the kids hit it off immediately. Sophie and Grace were starved for friendship, having been isolated for so long. Kevin, who'd been lonely as an only child, loved having other kids to play with. Rebecca was grateful for the company. She and Tom would sit at her kitchen table drinking coffee, while the kids played in the yard. She told him stories about her life before David, about the dreams she'd once had. Tom shared his own struggles as a single parent, how his ex-wife had left when Kevin was just a baby, how hard it had been to do everything alone. "You turned out okay, though," Rebecca said one afternoon. "Kevin's a great kid. You should be proud." "He is great," Tom agreed. "But I had the luxury of doing it without someone actively trying to destroy us. What you've done, keeping your daughters safe all this time, that takes a different kind of strength." In April, Detective Morrison called with major news. David Hartwell had been arrested. The federal case against him was solid. Multiple charges including fraud, racketeering, and witness tampering. His bail was set so high that even with his money, he couldn't make it. He was going to trial, and the prosecutor was confident about a conviction. "How long could he get?" Tom asked. "If convicted on all charges, 15 to 20 years minimum. He'd be an old man by the time he got out. And once word gets around about his other activities, his domestic abuse history, any custody claims he might have had are dead in the water." But there was still the matter of Rebecca's situation. In June, Detective Morrison arranged a meeting with the district attorney, a woman named Patricia Chen. Tom was asked to be there, along with Rebecca and her lawyer. The DA's office was intimidating, all dark wood and law books. Ms. Chen was a serious woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She listened without interruption as Rebecca told her story, as Tom testified to finding the girls, as Detective Morrison presented her evidence about David Hartwell's criminal activities and ongoing threat. When everyone had finished speaking, Ms. Chen sat back in her chair. "Ms. Hartwell, what you did was illegal. Deeply illegal. You falsified government documents, committed fraud, and interfered with a death investigation. Under normal circumstances, I would prosecute you to the full extent of the law." Rebecca's hand tightened around her lawyer's arm. Tom held his breath. "However," Ms. Chen continued, "these are not normal circumstances. I've reviewed the history of your case. The multiple police reports that went nowhere. The restraining orders that were violated. The custody battle where the system failed to protect you and your children. I've also looked at David Hartwell's criminal record, which is extensive and disturbing." She leaned forward. "I'm not going to prosecute you," the room erupted. Rebecca started crying. Her lawyer looked stunned. Tom felt his own eyes get watery. "But," Ms. Chen said firmly, and everyone went quiet again, "there are conditions. You will need to legally resurrect your identity. Your daughters will need new birth certificates, proper documentation. You'll work with our office to make everything legitimate. You'll also need to testify against David Hartwell in his trial. Your testimony about his abuse will help ensure he stays locked up for a very long time." "I'll do it," Rebecca said immediately. "Anything. I'll do anything. As for your sister Rachel and the coroner who helped you, I'm recommending that no charges be filed. They acted out of a desire to protect children in danger. While their methods were illegal, their intentions were to save lives. I think that matters." The trial happened in September. Tom sat in the courtroom as Rebecca testified. She was calm and strong, detailing years of abuse, the fear she'd lived with, the impossible choice she'd made. David Hartwell's lawyers tried to discredit her, but the evidence was overwhelming. Other victims came forward. Financial records painted a clear picture of his crimes. The jury took less than a day to convict him on all counts, 23 years in prison. By the time he got out, Sophie and Grace would be grown women with lives of their own. He'd never have power over them again. On a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after that Christmas Eve night, Tom and Kevin drove out to Rebecca's house. But this time it was for a celebration. Rebecca had legally reclaimed her identity. Sophie and Grace were enrolled in public school for the first time, making friends, living normal lives. The constant fear that had haunted them was finally gone. The kids were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. Rebecca and Tom sat on the porch steps watching them. "I never thought I'd have this," Rebecca said quietly. "A normal life, peace, the ability to just exist without looking over my shoulder." "You deserve it," Tom said. "You and the girls. You all deserve to be happy." Rebecca looked at him. "You know, you didn't have to keep coming around. After that first night, you could have just walked away. This wasn't your problem." "I couldn't walk away," Tom said. "From the moment I saw those girls standing in the snow, I was involved. And honestly, I'm glad I was. You guys have become important to us. To me and Kevin. We feel the same way," Rebecca said softly. She reached over and took his hand. "You saved our lives that night, literally. If you hadn't stopped, if you'd just driven past—" "But I didn't," Tom interrupted. "And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Kevin had his arm around Grace, explaining something about his video game. Sophie was doing cartwheels in the grass, showing off. "Detective Morrison called me yesterday," Rebecca said. "She wanted to check in, make sure everything was going okay. She said something interesting. She said that sometimes the